She learned to fly without wings when everything around her felt like a silent storm, and the world seemed heavy and loud at the same time, and there was a strange quiet ache living inside her chest like a hidden shadow that no one else could see, but she carried it every single day. And sometimes she wondered if anyone in this wide, bright world truly knew how much strength it took to simply keep moving forward while pretending everything was fine even when nothing actually was, and in that quiet wait she began to realize that courage does not always roar and strength does not always shout. Sometimes it breathes softly inside the heart and waits patiently to be noticed, and she was just like that silent strength waiting to discover the power that was already hers. Waiting to realize that she did not need permission to rise because everything she needed had been living within her all along, and life around her kept moving. People laughed, lights glowed, cars rushed, cities breathed, but somewhere inside her she felt like she was standing still, like she was on the edge of something bigger than fear and bigger than pain, a moment where she could either stay the same or finally choose herself, and she knew choosing herself would not be easy because independence is not just a word. It is a journey through doubts, tears, broken hopes, and brave decisions. It is walking even when your legs tremble. It is believing even when your heart feels tired. It is loving yourself even when the world tries to convince you that you are not enough. And she had heard those voices before, the ones that tried to shrink her, the ones that tried to control her, the ones that told her she was weak, too emotional, too soft, too fragile. But every time those voices echoed, she also heard another softer voice deep inside whispering, you are stronger than this, you are braver than you know, you are allowed to dream, you are allowed to feel, you are allowed to become everything you were meant to be. And that whisper mattered more than every doubt that had ever tried to cage her spirit, and slowly she began to stand a little taller, breathe a little deeper, and trust herself a little more, because growth never happens in loud, dramatic moments. Sometimes it happens quietly in the stillness of long nights when you sit alone with your fears and decide not to run from them anymore. And that was where her true journey began, not in applause, not in celebration, but in a quiet promise she made to herself that she would no longer live small, that she would no longer shrink herself to fit into places that were never made for her heart. And she looked at the sky one evening, feeling the cool air on her face, feeling the weight of everything she had survived, and something inside her softened and something inside her strengthened at the same time, and she realized that she did not need wings to fly. She only needed courage, hope, and trust in her own heart, because real flight is not about leaving the ground, it is about freeing the soul. And that was the moment she began to rise. She learned to fly without wings when the world tested her again, because every new sunrise carried questions, and every quiet night carried memories that tried to pull her back. And she sometimes felt like life was asking her, are you truly ready to change? Are you truly ready to choose yourself? And every part of her wanted to say yes. But choosing yourself is never as simple as speaking the word. It is a living promise that must be kept through tears, through fear, through lonely moments where you doubt everything and still keep going. And she had those nights where the room felt too quiet and her heart felt too loud, and every hidden fear she had once buried tried to speak again, telling her that maybe she was not meant to be strong, maybe she would fall again, maybe courage was temporary. But even in those fragile moments, she refused to surrender, and instead, she breathed slowly like someone learning to trust life again, and she reminded herself that healing is not a straight road, it is a winding journey full of moments where you move forward and moments where you pause, and sometimes even moments where you feel like you are moving backwards, yet in truth you are still growing, because you are learning more about yourself, your worth, your boundaries, your dreams, and the life you truly deserve. And day by day she began to understand something powerful, that independence does not mean you stop feeling, it means you do not let your fears control your choices, it means you walk even when your heart still remembers every past hurt, because the future deserves a chance to be brighter than what once broke you. And as she moved through her days, she started noticing little things she had never truly paid attention to before: the warmth of sunlight resting on her face, the gentle laughter of strangers, the way the wind felt like a quiet reassurance, the way city lights glowed at night like promises that life still held beauty. And those little moments became anchors, reminding her that she was still here, still breathing, still capable of hope, still worthy of love. And she looked at herself in the mirror one day, not searching for perfection, not searching for approval, just searching for truth. And she saw a woman who had carried storms and still stood tall. She saw someone who had cried silently, and still learned to smile again. She saw someone who had been doubted and yet refused to stop believing in her own heart, and when she saw that, she felt something shift deep inside, a calm strength rising like a warm river flowing through her soul, and she whispered inside herself that she was not broken, she was becoming, she was not lost, she was finding her way, she was not weak, she was healing, and healing itself is a powerful kind of strength, and with every step forward she began to allow herself to dream again, not small dreams, not dreams shaped by fear, but dreams shaped by courage, dreams shaped by possibility, dreams shaped by the belief that she deserved a life where she felt safe, valued, respected, loved, and free, and she promised herself that she would not let her past define the greatness of who she could still become, and the promise did not give her wings to escape reality. Instead, it gave her the strength to live fully within it, to face challenges with an open heart and an unbroken spirit, to choose kindness without losing herself, to give love without abandoning her worth, and to stand firm when life tried to push her back into silence. And through all of this, she realized something deeply beautiful, that real power is quiet, real strength is gentle, and real courage is calm and unwavering. And one ordinary day, as she walked outside, feeling the cool breeze and hearing the distant hum of the world, she closed her eyes and felt an overwhelming sense of peace, because for the first time in a long time, she was not running from herself, she was standing with herself, and that is where true freedom begins, within the heart that finally chooses to stay true to itself. She learned to fly without wings as her journey slowly unfolded, because every day began to feel like a quiet lesson written by life itself, and she started to see that every challenge, every memory, every fragile thought inside her heart carried meaning and purpose, and she no longer wanted to run from what she felt. Instead, she wanted to understand it, hold it gently, and grow from it, because real strength is not created when we avoid our pain. Real strength is created when we allow ourselves to sit with it and still choose hope. And she had moments where she felt the weight of expectations like unseen chains pulling her backward, expectations from society, expectations from people who never truly understood her, and expectations she had once placed on herself when she believed she had to be perfect to be worthy. And as she stood in the middle of all those pressures, she finally whispered inside her soul that she did not exist to satisfy anyone else, she did not exist to shrink her dreams for the comfort of others, she existed to live fully, to breathe freely, to walk her own path with courage and dignity. And that realization was like a soft sunrise inside her heart, a warm glow slowly pushing away the cold shadows of doubt and fear, and she began to feel a new sense of clarity. She began to understand that courage does not always look like loud rebellion. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace, choosing calm, choosing a life where your heart feels safe and respected. And she promised herself that she would never again dim her light just so someone else could feel more comfortable, because dimming her light had only ever brought her silence, emptiness, and pain. And now she wanted more. She wanted color, she wanted growth, she wanted the kind of life where she could breathe deeply without fear, where laughter did not feel forced, where love did not feel like a battlefield, and where her spirit did not feel trapped behind invisible walls. And with every passing day, she grew more confident in her quiet strength, and although fear still tried to whisper inside her mind, telling her she might fall, telling her she might fail, telling her she might end up alone, she answered those fears with a softer but stronger voice, saying, "Even if I fall, I will rise again. Even if I fail, I will learn. Even if I walk alone for a while, I will still choose myself, because my worth is not defined by who stands beside me. My worth is defined by the courage beating inside my heart." And with that belief guiding her, she started taking small but powerful steps. She began making choices that honored her feelings. She began setting boundaries she once believed she had no right to set. She began saying no to situations that drained her soul and yes to moments that filled her with peace. And those choices were not always easy. Sometimes they came with tears, sometimes they came with fear, sometimes they came with loneliness. But every step made her stronger. Every decision shaped her into someone braver, more grounded, more alive, and she could feel her spirit slowly unfolding like wings made not of feathers, but of faith, resilience, and unwavering self-respect. And one quiet evening, as the sky turned soft with fading light, she sat with herself and felt Something beautiful blooming in her chest. It was not loud, it was not dramatic, it was simply a gentle knowing that she was finally becoming the woman she was always meant to be, a woman who carried storms yet still chose sunshine, a woman who carried scars yet still chose love, a woman who carried memories yet still chose a future filled with possibility. And in that gentle knowing she smiled softly, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally believed in her own strength and she finally trusted her own heart, and that belief was the real beginning of her flight. She learned to fly without wings as life kept unfolding in quiet, unexpected ways, and she discovered that growth rarely arrives with loud applause. Instead, it comes softly through moments of honesty with yourself, and she began to understand that the greatest battles she faced were not with the world outside, but with the storms that lived within her thoughts and memories and fears that whispered doubt inside her heart. And she realized that to truly become free, she had to face those storms not with anger, not with denial, but with compassion and understanding, because healing is not about pretending the past never happened. It is about honoring what you lived through while refusing to let it control what comes next. And she started allowing herself to feel everything she had once buried, the sadness, the disappointment, the loneliness, the dreams that had once been shattered. And instead of seeing those feelings as weakness, she began to see them as proof of her courage, because feeling deeply means you are still alive, still open, still capable of love and hope. And she promised herself that she would never again apologize for having a sensitive heart, because a sensitive heart is not fragile, it is powerful, it is capable of empathy, connection, and strength beyond measure. And as she walked through her days, she began noticing how her spirit was slowly changing. She no longer moved through life just trying to survive. She began wanting to live, truly live, with intention, with purpose, with meaning. And every step she took felt like a quiet declaration that she deserved joy, she deserved peace, she deserved to feel safe inside her own soul. And the more she believed this, the more her world began to shift, and people who once tried to control her no longer had power over her, because she had learned to say no without guilt and yes without fear. And she had learned that protecting her peace was not selfish, it was necessary. And she started surrounding herself with moments that nurtured her heart, calm mornings, honest conversations, gentle laughter. And she learned to enjoy being with herself, because she was no longer running from silence. Silence had become a friend, a place where she could breathe, a place where she could listen to the voice inside her that had been waiting for so long to be heard. And that inner voice always told her the same truth, that she was worthy, that she was capable, that she was enough. And this truth became her anchor whenever doubt tried to return. And even when challenges appeared, as they always do, she faced them differently, not with fear, but with quiet determination and the calm strength of someone who now knew her value. And she discovered that power does not always come from being loud or fearless. Sometimes it comes from being steady, patient, and kind to yourself while you keep moving forward. And one soft evening, when the sky was painted with fading gold, she stood outside, feeling the air around her like a gentle embrace, and she closed her eyes and felt the weight of everything she had survived, everything she had healed, and everything she was still becoming. And instead of feeling tired, she felt grateful, grateful that she had not given up, grateful that she had chosen herself, grateful that she had found the courage to rebuild her heart. And in that moment she understood something deeply beautiful, that flying without wings is not about escaping life, it is about rising within it, rising above doubt, rising above fear, rising above everything that once tried to break you, and standing tall with a heart that still believes in love, hope, and endless possibility. And with that realization, her spirit felt lighter, stronger, freer than ever before. And she knew this was only the beginning of her journey, because once a person discovers their inner power, there is no limit to how far they can rise. She learned to fly without wings as her heart continued to grow stronger and clearer, because with each passing day she was learning more about who she truly was and who she wanted to become. And she realized that real freedom is not found in running away from life, it is found in choosing the life that honors your soul. And she had spent so many years trying to fit into expectations, trying to please people who never saw her full worth, trying to keep her spirit small so others would feel comfortable, and it had left her tired and quiet and unseen. But now she was done living that way. Now she wanted to live boldly, not loud or reckless, but boldly in truth, in love, in strength, and in deep respect for her own heart, and she began to notice how her world slowly changed, not because everything around her was different, but because she was different inside, and when the inside changes, the outside begins to reflect it in gentle ways, and she started attracting peace where there once had been chaos. She started attracting honesty where there once had been manipulation. She started attracting kindness where there once had been emotional storms, and this shift did not happen overnight. It happened slowly, with patience, with tears, with courage, but it was happening. And that itself was a beautiful miracle, and as she moved forward, she also understood something deeply human, that healing is not a competition, that growth has no timeline, and that everyone carries battles that no one else can see. And this understanding made her softer toward the world, but also firmer toward herself, softer in empathy, stronger in boundaries, kinder in spirit, but unwavering in self-respect, and she carried herself differently now, not with arrogance, but with calm dignity, like someone who finally knows they deserve to be treated with care, and she no longer settled for half love, for half effort, for half honesty, because she had learned that accepting less than you deserve slowly breaks your own heart. And she promised she would never break her own heart again, and life continued to test her, as life always does. Moments came where she was challenged, moments came where old fears tried to rise again, moments where uncertainty whispered that maybe she was not as strong as she believed, but now she had evidence within her soul. She had proof of every storm she had survived, of every night she had endured, of every tear that had not destroyed her, but instead shaped her into someone wiser and braver, and every challenge reminded her of what she was capable of rather than what she was afraid of, and that is when she truly began to feel her inner wings. They were not made of feathers, they were made of faith, resilience, courage, compassion, and unwavering self-love, and through these wings she began to see the world differently. She began to see that possibilities still existed, that dreams were still allowed, that happiness was still within reach, and not some distant idea meant only for others. And on a quiet evening with the sky painted in gentle colors, she paused to breathe and allowed herself to feel proud, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly proud in her heart, proud of how far she had come, proud of the strength she had built, proud of the love she still carried, proud of the woman she was becoming, and in that gratitude her spirit felt light, like wind gently lifting her from the inside, and she realized once again that flying without wings is about trusting yourself enough to move forward. Trusting your heart enough to keep loving, trusting your soul enough to believe that your story is still unfolding beautifully even when you cannot see every chapter yet, and she felt ready to continue her journey, ready to face what comes next with grace, with courage, and with an open heart that no longer fears its own power, because she finally knew she was never too much, never too weak, never too broken. She was simply human, beautifully imperfect, and endlessly capable of rising. She learned to fly without wings as the days turned into months, and every sunrise reminded her that life is not a waiting room, it is a journey meant to be lived fully, and she began to notice how small victories carried immense meaning, how choosing herself over old patterns, over fear, over doubt became a quiet revolution inside her, and she realized that independence is not a destination, it is a practice. It is waking up each day and deciding to honor your heart even when the world whispers that you should settle, even when voices try to convince you that you are not enough. And she practiced this every morning in subtle ways, in the way she spoke to herself, in the way she let herself rest, in the way she refused to apologize for her joy, in the way she allowed herself to say no when she needed to, and every choice felt like a seed planting a garden of freedom inside her soul. And as she walked through her life, she noticed the subtle changes in her presence. People began to respond differently to her, not because she demanded respect, but because she carried it naturally, because she had learned to respect herself first, and that respect shaped the way she interacted with the world, the way she made decisions, the way she handled love, loss, and every challenge that came her way. And she discovered that courage is not always loud, sometimes it is quiet, like sitting with your own fears and gently telling them that you will not let them control your heart. And she had spent years afraid of her own emotions, afraid of failure, afraid of rejection, but now she welcomed them as teachers, as proof that she was alive, that she was capable, that she was human. And even when she stumbled with grace, knowing that falling does not define you, rising does. And Every time she rose, she felt stronger, lighter, more sure of herself, and with that strength she began to dream again, real dreams, dreams not constrained by fear or doubt, dreams that honored her spirit, dreams that called to her heart. And she allowed herself to imagine a life that was brighter, kinder, freer, a life where love was abundant, where friendships were deep, where creativity flowed, and she no longer waited for anyone's permission to create this life. She understood that the only permission she needed had always been within her heart, and that knowledge gave her wings stronger than any fear could ever clip, stronger than any voice could ever silence. And as she walked one evening with the wind brushing her face and the city glowing softly around her, she paused and closed her eyes and felt the rhythm of her own heartbeat, and in that moment, she felt a surge of gratitude for every pain, every tear, every doubt, because they had all led her here, to this strength, to this calm, to this knowing that she was capable of rising above anything life placed before her. And she smiled softly, because for the first time, she truly believed that nothing could hold her down, not fully, not permanently, because she had learned to fly without wings, with courage, resilience, love, and an unshakable faith in her own heart. And with that faith, she knew that life was no longer something to fear, but something to embrace, something to shape, something to honor. And she felt ready to step fully into her own story, ready to claim the happiness and freedom she had always deserved, because her spirit had learned the most powerful truth of all, that she was not defined by what had happened to her. She was defined by the strength she carried and the choices she made to rise. She learned to fly without wings as her heart opened to life in ways she had never imagined, because she discovered that freedom is not about escaping the past, it is about embracing the present and trusting yourself to step into the future with courage and clarity. And she realized that true independence is rooted in knowing who you are, even when the world tries to label you, even when the world tries to control you, even when the world tries to convince you that your dreams are too big, too much, too impossible. And she began to see that life was not meant to be a cage, it was meant to be a canvas, a place where she could paint with her own colors, her own choices, her own vision. And even when fear knocked at her door, she answered it with steady breath and calm determination, knowing that fear is not the enemy, it is a messenger reminding you that something valuable is at stake, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. And she learned to face fear without letting it paralyze her, to acknowledge it without letting it define her, and every small victory over doubt, every gentle affirmation of self-love became like wings, strengthening her spirit, lifting her higher than she had ever imagined possible. And as she walked through the quiet streets at night, feeling the soft glow of streetlights on her skin, she thought about all the times she had tried to shrink herself, all the times she had hidden her dreams, all the times she had silenced her own heart to make space for others. And she felt a tender compassion for that younger self, because she understood now that every choice she had made had been out of survival, out of love, out of hope, and she forgave herself fully, and in forgiving herself, she felt a lightness bloom inside her chest, like the first warm breeze of spring after a long winter, and with that lightness, she began to dream even bigger than before she imagined. A life where she could love without fear, where she could speak without apology, where she could create without limits, where every step she took was aligned with her truest self. And she knew that these dreams were not impossible, because she had already survived the impossible, because she had already walked through storms and come out stronger, braver, wiser. And she felt a quiet joy in knowing that her journey was not about perfection, it was about presence, it was about showing up for herself every single day, it was about choosing love even when it hurt, it was about choosing hope even when darkness lingered, it was about choosing herself even when others tried to convince her that she should not. And as she stood beneath the open sky, feeling the stars like tiny reminders of infinite possibility, she whispered to her own heart that she was ready, that she was capable, that she would no longer wait for permission from anyone to live the life she had always deserved. And in that quiet knowing, she felt her soul rise like a gentle tide, lifting her from the inside, and she understood finally that flying without wings is not about escaping gravity, it is about releasing the weight of doubt, it is about trusting the power within, it is about honoring every scar, every tear, every moment of courage that had brought you to this point. And she smiled softly, because she knew that her story was still unfolding, and every chapter yet to come held freedom, hope, love, and endless possibility. And with that understanding, she felt unstoppable, unbreakable, alive, and free. She learned to fly without wings as the seasons changed, and with each passing day she discovered more about the depth of her own heart and the strength of her own spirit, because she realized that real courage is not always about grand gestures, it is about showing up for yourself quietly, consistently, and with love even when the world does not notice. And she began to see that independence is not about being alone, it is about feeling whole inside even when no one else is there to affirm your worth. And she started trusting herself more than ever before, trusting her choices, trusting her instincts, trusting the soft, quiet voice inside that always knew the way even when her mind screamed with doubt. And she practiced patience with herself like a gardener tending fragile seedlings. She allowed her own growth to unfold naturally, without forcing it, without rushing it, without comparing it to anyone else. And in that patience, she found peace, a deep, steady peace that settled into her bones and reminded her that she was exactly where she was meant to be, even if the journey felt slow, even if the path seemed uncertain, even if fear sometimes whispered that she might fall. She knew she could rise again, because rising was her nature, and rising was her choice. And as she walked through her days, she began to notice the subtle beauty in ordinary moments, the way sunlight streamed through leaves, the way laughter spilled naturally when people felt safe, the gentle rhythm of rain on a window, the quiet warmth of a cup of tea in her hands. And she allowed herself to savor these moments fully, without guilt, without distraction, because she realized that living fully is not about chasing constant excitement, it is about noticing the quiet miracles around you and feeling gratitude for them. And with that gratitude, her heart expanded. She felt more connected, more alive, more capable of love and joy, and she started to dream in color again, dreams that were vivid and bold, dreams that honored her soul, dreams that called to her heart. And she no longer held back, she no longer silenced her desires, she no longer settled for anything less than what nourished her spirit. And even when challenges came, as they always do, she met them with calm courage, because she had learned that strength is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to keep moving forward in spite of it. And every obstacle became a lesson, every setback a teacher, every moment of uncertainty a reminder that she was resilient and capable. And as night fell one evening and the stars glimmered above her, she sat quietly and let herself feel proud of how far she had come, proud of the strength she had built, proud of the love she still carried, proud of the woman she was becoming. And she felt her spirit lift like wind beneath invisible wings, wings made of courage, faith, hope, and self-love. And in that quiet lift, she realized that flying without wings is not about escaping reality, it is about embracing it fully and choosing yourself within it. And she smiled softly, because she knew that she was free, free from doubt, free from fear, free from anyone else defining her worth. And that freedom was hers to carry, always hers to honor, always hers to nurture. And she felt ready to continue her journey, to rise higher, to love deeper, to dream bigger, to live fully, because she had discovered the power that had been inside her all along. She learned to fly without wings as the days rolled gently into months, and she felt the steady unfolding of her own life, like a quiet river carving its path through stone. And she began to understand that the journey of self-discovery is not linear, it is full of twists, turns, pauses, and leaps of faith. And she welcomed each moment, because she realized that every experience, whether painful or joyful, carried a lesson meant to shape her heart and spirit. And she began to trust herself more fully, to honor her own needs, desires, and emotions, to speak her truth even when it felt uncomfortable, to hold her boundaries even when others might resist, to nurture her dreams even when the world whispered that they were too big or too bold. And with that trust came a calm strength, a grounded certainty that she could navigate anything that came her way. And she began to notice how far she had come from the person who once doubted her own worth, who once feared her own voice, who once hid herself to make others comfortable. And she felt a tender compassion for that version of herself, because she understood that every choice she had made had been survival, and every struggle she had endured had been courage. And she forgave herself fully for all the times she had shrunk, for all the times she had silenced, for all the times she had doubted. And in forgiving herself, she felt her spirit expand like wings stretching wide, ready to rise higher than ever before. And she allowed herself to dream again, dreams that were not small or cautious, but dreams that were vibrant and full of possibility, dreams that spoke to the deepest corners of her heart, dreams that reflected who she truly was. And even when doubt tried to creep back in, she acknowledged it without fear, without shame, without hesitation, and she reminded herself that fear does not define her courage, does her resilience, does her choice to rise above the noise of the world and the echoes of the past define her, and with every step she felt stronger, more alive, more capable of loving, living, creating, and becoming. And one quiet evening, as she stood beneath a sky full of stars, feeling the cool wind brush her face, she closed her eyes and let herself feel the fullness of her own strength, the depth of her own love, the power of her own heart. And she understood something deeply beautiful, that flying without wings is not about leaving the earth, it is about lifting the soul, it is about trusting yourself enough to soar above doubt, above fear, above limitation. And she smiled softly because she knew that she had found something no one could ever take from her, the quiet, steady, unwavering truth that she was enough exactly as she was, and that knowing carried her forward into each new day with grace, with courage, with hope. And she felt ready to continue her journey, ready to embrace every moment with open arms, ready to honor her story, ready to rise higher and higher, because she had learned the most powerful truth of all, that true flight begins inside, and once you find it, nothing can hold you down. She learned to fly without wings as she stood at the edge of her own becoming, feeling the gentle pull of everything she had survived and everything she had yet to embrace. And she realized that life is not about perfection, it is about presence, it is about choosing yourself over and over again, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. And she felt the quiet strength of her own spirit rising inside her like sunlight through clouds, and she understood that independence is not a destination. It is a constant practice. It is showing up for yourself in moments of fear, in moments of doubt, in moments of exhaustion. And she had shown up for herself more times than she could count, more times than she had ever given herself credit for, and now she could feel the wings of her soul expanding wider than ever before, wings made not of feathers, but of courage, resilience, compassion, faith, and unwavering self-love. And as she moved forward through her days, she began to notice how every choice she made aligned with the woman she was becoming, the woman who no longer shrank, the woman who no longer silenced her dreams, the woman who no longer apologized for her joy. And even when challenges arose, as they always do, she faced them with a calm, steady certainty, knowing that falling is not failure, rising is her true measure. And she remembered every moment of doubt, every tear, every fear, every silent night where she had whispered to herself that she could not, and she realized now that every one of those moments had been a stepping stone lifting her to this place of quiet power. And with that understanding, she allowed herself to dream bigger than ever before, dreams that reflected the fullness of her heart, dreams that spoke to the depth of her soul, dreams that were not constrained by fear or expectation, but shaped only by possibility and love. And she knew that she could trust herself to honor those dreams because she had already carried herself through storms. She had already faced the shadows inside her own mind. She had already chosen hope and courage again and again, and she felt a soft joy rising within her chest, a joy that was not loud, not dramatic, but steady and strong and beautiful because it came from knowing she had found her own truth. And she smiled as the wind brushed her face, as the stars shone quietly above her, as the world moved softly around her. And she understood something deeply timeless, that flying without wings is not about escaping the weight of life, it is about embracing it fully. It is about trusting yourself enough to rise above doubt, above fear, above limitation. It is about honoring every scar, every tear, every victory, and realizing that each one is proof of your strength. And she felt unstoppable, unshakable, alive, and free because she had discovered the most powerful truth of all, that the only wings you ever truly need are the wings of your own heart, the courage of your own soul, the faith in yourself that carries you higher than any obstacle, higher than any fear, higher than anything that once tried to hold you back. And she closed her eyes softly and felt herself rise, letting the quiet power inside lift her fully into the life she had always deserved. And she knew that from this moment on, she would never forget that she could always fly.